Welcome, everyone. I'm Nick Decker with the AEC team here at Ignite. It's my pleasure to welcome Christian Berger. Christian is the founder of Berger Consulting, which is a construction IT consultancy. They happen to have deep experience in the software selection, integration, and process improvement realm. Christian has 30 years of experience in the construction industry and is an adjunct professor at Northwestern and a member of the AGC IT Steering Committee. I'm excited to hear this presentation about the top trends and considerations for construction IT. If you do have questions as we go, please feel free to post them in the questions panel. That's the little question mark in the bottom right. And we'll try to address them at the end as time allows. But with that, Christian, I'll kick it over to you.
Super. Thanks, Nick. Welcome, everybody. I'm hoping you're having a good conference so far and that this little talk of mine is among your favorites from the conference overall. We're going to be covering a number of topics related to technology and the industry. I am not going to be answering very specific questions about one product or another. I very much want to provide you with a framework for what's going on, how to think about it, how to plan, how to organize IT, how to go about selecting and strategically various applications, giving you sort of a horizon, if you will, of where we are and where we're headed. It has been a challenging environment, as you guys all well know. The industry has not adopted quickly, has not in all cases adopted well. And now there's even more choices available from a software standpoint. So it's a confusing marketplace. Construction firms have not been organized well to optimize. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. I am going to be moving at a brisk pace because I want to try and wrap between 3 and 3:05 Eastern so that we do allow time for questions. It was offered to have questions chatted into the chat bar there, and Steve and Nick will be monitoring that and certainly ask me those questions of yours near the end. So we are going to take a brief look back at the industry and technology where we've been, but then move forward. We're going to be moving forward and looking at things like office administrative software like ERP and estimating, field software like timekeeping, safety, and that sort of thing, some design and fabrication aspects, and then try and conclude with concepts around IT strategy and organizing for optimal results. That's a tall order in a short period of time, but since you're already familiar with a lot of these issues, it should help provide that framework in that context. So with that, I like to call this a look back at the good old days. There was a time years and years ago when our industry was heavily spreadsheet dependent and paper forms. In fact, I still run into the occasional company that has a paper form, sometimes in triplicate, if you can remember those days, and just a very manual, very inefficient way of capturing data. Workflow was handled through email, and so we just had bunches and bunches of emails that really went nowhere after the inbox. There was, at the time, still a lot of paper filing. Some companies migrated to electronic files and folders on the network. In fact, my friends at Ignite probably walk into that more often than not, where we've got an overloaded G drive with just file folders upon file folders. A lot of double and triple entry of data. Maybe still a dated ERP solution, something that was written years and years ago that is kind of the back office bookkeeping job cost kind of system. I would say there was more than a few occasions where companies would acquire new software and then maybe not implement very well or at all. So we had something called shelfware, where we acquired software but haven't used it. Now that certainly has improved. Back in the day, the field didn't have good connectivity, and the investment in IT was kind of kept at a minimum, more like maintenance level, just keeping the lights on, the servers running, storage, et cetera, not any kind of significant investment in IT beyond maintenance. So for some of you that probably aren't even old enough to remember these days, but that's how it used to look a long time ago. And thankfully, we're moving beyond that. But that's where we've came from. So when you look at this in the grander scale, the amount of the opportunity for improvement is tremendous from a value perspective. And I would tell you that a lot of people have taken notice of that, the value opportunity. And we have people in our industry now that didn't used to be here, private equity, public traded companies, a lot of investment coming in on the construction technology side. Everyone is looking at our industry right now, assuming we are going to move forward at light speed because there is so much opportunity improvement and unlock quite a bit of that value. So that's what's happening now. And it makes for a fairly robust marketplace, confusing at times, but exciting at the same time. So in today's construction environment, we're still dealing with a labor shortage. And I would have to say that the skilled labor shortage, and I would have to say that is something that is pretty much across the country. Everywhere that I go, and I'm sort of all over the US, sometimes up in Canada, I mean, it's always the same, just tremendous shortages of labor. So getting work isn't actually the problem. Executing the work is the problem. There is now, because of COVID, a fair bit of disruption in the supply chain. I have contractors who are complaining about prices not being honored on purchase orders until stuff is delivered. So we can't even guarantee pricing, and stuff not being delivered or not fully delivered as promised. So planning from a material management standpoint is a pretty big challenge and requires rethinking the business process. I would tell you that one of the areas that was always a challenge was an understaffed IT department. It was understaffed both from a quantity and a quality standpoint, if you will. It was only the biggest firms who used to have a CIO, a chief information officer. And now that chief information officer or IT director position is becoming more prevalent. And you do need someone who is strategic, who has vision, who can speak with senior management and plan and organize. And it's not the IT managers of before. The people, I mean, I used to walk into an IT manager's office and I had all the books on the bookshelf of all the network administrative things and access database and what have you. And they had a tool belt. They did, provisioning and break fix and those days are thankfully kind of behind us. And I think that the new IT managers in construction have to be more visionary, more forward-looking, and definitely more strategic. And then fill in behind. We can't just make do with one or two people in our shop anymore. We have to have more, or go to a managed service scenario where we can hire those IT resources on an as-needed basis. As I mentioned, there's a lot of investment coming in from the outside, both on the software side, and I'm seeing even contractors being rolled up in private equity deals that are turning into what are called roll-ups. And there are a number of people who feel like our industry has been inefficient, and by applying more professional management and more technology, they can unlock some of that value. I think we had demanding owners before, and it's only getting more so, and they're expecting more use of technology from their contractor community. We do have a tech-savvy workforce, and that's been good, but now we've got to train, we've got to provision, we've got to have software for them. So that's been a change and a positive one, and certainly better job site connectivity. I am seeing a fairly significant move to prefab and modular building. So the mechanical, the electrical trades are doing a lot more prefab in shops. Some of the big GCs are getting into modular building, but that's requiring a slightly different mindset that I'll share with you in a few minutes than before. So that's having a technology impact as well. And I think that in some ways, many risks continue to exist. We're still a litigious kind of a construction environment, and we've got labor risk, compliance risk, safety risk, job costs, material management. I mean, the risks abound. So we've got to have good tools and technology to help with that. So what's going on out in the field? I'm certainly seeing a lot more mobile applications being deployed. Some of the project management systems have mobile apps. Some are standalone for, say, timekeeping or production management. There's QA/QC, there's safety. So we have more mobile apps than we did before, and that's generally positive. We're getting away from this notion of having paper timesheets that would get scanned in or faxed in, and we're getting away from spreadsheets that get keyed in and emailed in. So having mobile apps out in the field is tremendous. And I would extend that even to the service management side. So you've got service technicians now that have mobile applications for work order completion and such. The field is really dependent on updated drawings, and I'm seeing companies deploy a variety of solutions to help them with drawing management, version control, markups, as-builts, and what have you. There's a lot more labor compliance demands than before. Some job sites have badging requirements where you can only get on the job site if you've got a badge of some sort. You have to have a certain training like OSHA 30 or some other training prior to coming on the job site, drug testing. I mean, all these COVID vaccinations. So there's all of this compliance, and contractors didn't used to have very good tracking for all of that because that typically was in the domain of human resources. And that's only been maturing in the last 10 years, I would say. And some companies have moved to more robust HR solutions, and that's going to be an absolute necessity with all the compliance tracking that we have now. I'm also seeing a greater demand for production and productivity tracking out in the field. The ability for a foreman to record units complete on a day-to-day basis, square feet, lineal feet, cubic yards, loads, whatever the measure, what did we get done? And being able to show the foreman that day, how did you do? How did you do against plan? Historically, we haven't been able to provide that until a week later, sometimes 2 weeks later. And by then it was too late to do anything about it. So the immediate production and productivity has been a tremendous benefit. Certainly the field needs access to collaborative platforms so they can keep up with purchase orders, RFIs, submittals, updated drawings, what have you. And that's been good. There's safety apps out there. And certainly now, as we're deploying more in the realm of what's called LMS, learning management systems, we're able to provide the field with training content on that's generally available or even specific to the company, like how to cure concrete in the cold, or how to set a particular form, or how to shore up trenching, fall protection. I mean, all these training pieces, if you will, videos or otherwise, can be provided. So the field has access. The challenge can be we don't want the workers getting distracted, and we certainly want them concentrating on the work. So companies struggle. There's a bit of a tension between providing them tools and overloading them with what they would view as administrative work. So what's going on in the office? I would say one of the biggest trends we're seeing is the move to a more robust HR platform. We've been involved in probably, a dozen HR selections over the last couple of years where companies have said, you know what, our ERP system that has an HR module isn't robust enough. It doesn't have employee self-serve. It doesn't have benefits, training and development, onboarding, recruiting. And so companies are starting to look at these mid-range and upper-end HR platforms for all the things I just mentioned. And I think that's generally been a good trend. But the challenge can be that has to be integrated back to the construction firm's payroll application. So that's something that has to be looked at. Estimating and bidding, we're seeing a lot of companies upgrading from traditional spreadsheet templates to commercially available estimating and bidding solutions. So that's positive. More companies are going and automating their marketing and business development function with CRM solutions like Essential and Salesforce and probably some others. And that's proving to be a rich vein, if you will, of data that leads, opportunities, prospects, pipeline, win-loss, all of that information that historically was inside of a salesman's notebook or bound up in a bunch of emails. The ERP system, I would say, is an interesting one as well. The marketplace generally isn't happy at the moment, and that's a general statement, probably a little inflammatory, but they're not happy with the condition of their ERP, and they're frustrated because of where the market is with that. And I think there are some things happening that's going to bring about change in that realm. But and I would say the shape of ERP is going to change as well, and you're going to see that in a couple minutes here. I'll talk more about what that's going to look like. Companies are starting to be more process oriented. So rather than say, oh, I want to buy a CRM application, or I want to buy a purchasing application, or I want to automate this, they're actually looking at end to end. And Procure to Pay is a good example. If you were to look at Procure to Pay process from end to end, you would probably find out that you touch the data and the records in Procure to Pay 6 times, maybe 7, from bill of material, requisition, PO, receiving, invoice, check. And those are the obvious ones when it's streamlined. Sometimes there's change orders involved. Sometimes there's an RFQ involved. So what software can we use that would go end to end for Procure to Pay? As an example, scale ticketing for the heavy highways contractors, another good example. So I think that's good to be taking more of a process orientation and simply sitting down with Visio or some other flow charting software and mapping out your current processes. What you find out is, wow, we touch that data a lot. And sometimes when you're in a room with people who are involved in that, you find out that data, that there are people that are in the room who are like, oh, I didn't know we did that. Gosh, that doesn't look very efficient. I didn't know we had this process over here. So just creating awareness of the degree of inefficiency is pretty interesting. And certainly project management is a component of this that I could spend the rest of our time together on. But the use of Procure, the use of other project management solutions, owner-demanded project management solutions, ERP embedded project management solutions. I mean, we are not short for options, but deciding on one and then integrating it within the business can be a challenge. So I can't, unfortunately, spend enough time here, but our traditional ERP footprint was this upper box with general ledger, payroll, AP, AR, billing, purchasing, sometimes equipment, sometimes inventory. And that should look familiar to many of you on this call. Now, what some of you may have built into that ERP is human resources, equipment, timekeeping, project management. But in some cases, those are actually third-party solutions that bolt onto the ERP. So we're seeing kind of 2 models available. Now, that would also then entail possibly having a data warehouse implemented so that all of the data can rest in an accessible place and provide business intelligence, KPIs, you may have heard of those, some way of measuring where we're at instead of having to go in the system directly and look something up on a report. So I think that's a favorable trend, but not one without some complexity. Now, that little bin off to the right, fabrication, none of the ERP systems that serve construction traditionally, job cost, subcontract, billing, have fabrication. So all of them depend on fabrication being third party. And there are third party fabrication applications available, but they don't tie to the ERP. There are some larger scale ERP systems that have fabrication built in, but a greater cost, greater complexity. I will say that this is possibly a little ahead of where you're thinking about your issues today. but this will become an issue when you start fabricating more. So be aware as you fabricate more, you've got to be mindful of where that fabrication is going to fall and how. I mentioned the HR and payroll function. This one's gotten really interesting, and I wouldn't have thought it, but some of the HR systems that are out there that serve in construction have they have benefits administration, onboarding, recruiting, that kind of thing, and they're pretty good for that, and they're employee self-service. But some of the HR solutions insist on doing payroll. So now you've got this HR system that's pretty big, pretty expensive, and it's going to do payroll. Well, everybody on the call, you can stop hyperventilating because it's not a recommendation of mine, but I am aware that that is problematic because the construction payroll, as you guys well know, is very challenging, particularly with certifieds and unions, prevailing wage, reciprocity, retroactive. I mean, there's all kinds of nuances that these third-party payroll systems haven't yet figured out. So we're not in favor of that yet. And we don't want labor costs to be delayed getting to project management out to the field. And you've got another dimension over here called time card solution, which is there are a variety of payroll time card solutions out there in the market, WorkMax, Austin Lane, Rumbix, a number of other ones that are HH2. There's a number of them out there that are being used for time cards, sometimes for production entry. And that would presumably need to tie to both payroll and human resources. So again, a little bit of a knotty mess in here, but it's one that can be highly efficient if streamlined. And it also relates to some of what we talked about in terms of compliance. You don't want to be assigning certain foremen, certain workers to job sites where there's a COVID vaccine requirement and they don't have a COVID vaccine. Or you don't want to send a mechanic, a technician out to a customer site to fix a refrigeration problem when they don't have the particular skill set or tools. So there's a lot of HR data that influences behavior in the rest of the system. So this, I would say, is one of the more frequent situations we're seeing right now. I won't spend too much time here other than to say we have seen most contractors now. I mean, for a long time, we had just spreadsheet template galore and very complex multi-tab, hidden columns, macros, all that stuff. And all that development was up in one person's head. And if somebody made a change, a cell, a row, it broke everything. So it wasn't very efficient. It wasn't very productive, and the data didn't go anywhere. And now we're seeing more robust estimating solutions being deployed for the estimating and bidding, the bid solicitation, and being able, you see these lines here, from estimating, we should be able to produce a budget, a schedule of value for billing, and a bill of material for purchasing. And sometimes these estimating solutions, this is more the case in heavy civil, but these estimating solutions actually have their own time card and production capability. So the data travels back from time card, looks at the plan and says, oh, you did 500 feet of curb and gutter today? Well, you earned 87 man hours and you only used 64. Good job. So it's giving them immediate feedback on how they're performing. And takeoff is also being automated and has been for a while. I think that one's in a better condition. I mentioned earlier this notion of procure to pay, so I'm not going to really dwell, but I mean, here's one example of, now this isn't very detailed yet, but you could start your procure to pay conversation with something like this. And if anybody's good with Visio or Lucidchart, you can actually color code. And maybe the first two boxes are red for the estimating solution. The next three boxes are blue for ERP. And then we've got other systems, sorry for the typo, other systems to handle the receiving an invoice and payment. And submittal process is another system. So you get to see visually how many systems are involved in a given process. And then you take these processes and drill down and do more detail. Certainly, we've all felt the presence of BIM now, modeling, and I've run into a few companies that are still on the early stages of that. Our advice, our recommendations is to get model. If you're not already model savvy, get there and quickly, because this one isn't going away like New Coke or something. It's not a trend that isn't going to stay. And your owners may not be asking for this yet, or some of your owners are, and some of your owners are. BIM may not be in the bid documents yet, but I'm seeing it in a lot of places, and the expectations are much higher. And some of you might say, well, yeah, they're expecting it, but they don't really know what they want to do with it. Fair enough. Why don't you show them the value? Build your case for strategic competitive advantage by showing them what they can do with the model and how valuable it is after the fact from a facility maintenance standpoint, from changes and enhancements to the building. There's so much that could be done. So ramp up your BIM capability soon. I am seeing more. There's a little bit at the higher end of parametric modeling where it's necessary. This concept of DFMA, some of you may have already run into, but it's the idea you can't really take a traditionally designed building and then give it to a manufacturing plant and say, here, prefab this, because that doesn't work all that well unless there's a lot of modification. Designed for manufacturing and automation is the DFMA. And that is the idea that the people doing the building design are building it to be prefabricated. So they're using pre-existing elements or choosing from a library of things that can be prefabricated. I'm also seeing a lot of, not a lot, but there's a trend toward 3D printing, and particularly in lower income homes and some other places. And I'm also seeing mass timber catching on in certain areas. And I think that's a very positive trend environmentally, but it's also changing the demands on our technology. Okay, I'm going to have to speed along here. I think this is an area that my friends in Ignite certainly would appreciate. This is the whole project management, document management. I don't like that project management and document management end up converging into a single conversation, because they are not. Project management should be discussing RFI, submittals, change order request, drawings, QA/QC, all of the normal documents. Whereas document management is more about content management and control. Where is our content? Who can have access to it? Is it accessible in the field? How do we handle version control? All of these things. And that extends beyond just project management. That could include HR docs. It could include procurement docs, estimating and bidding docs, all kinds of things. So the content management is an enterprise conversation, where project management is a departmental conversation. And for time, I think I'm going to leave it there. But if I could just emphasize, keep those conversations separate. I think it's important, and I'll just hit a couple of things in here. It's very important that companies, when they think about their technology stack and their technology direction, it should be in alignment with the business. You can't be developing a technology strategy without some notion of where we headed. Are we a self-perform contractor? Are we heavy with equipment? Do we have service application? Are we growing geographically? Are we growing volume-wise? Are we changing the nature of our contract delivery method? I mean, there's all sorts of questions. And if I'm an IT director in a construction firm, I'm sitting back. I'm not doing anything, because I want to know where the firm is heading and what are the value propositions, if you will, what are the areas that are most significant need. And then I can deploy my technology budget toward those things, because you cannot be good at everything and arguably just be okay on some things, because the things that are really important for self-perform, it would be things like labor management, recruiting and onboarding, development, time card, productivity. All those things are very important for self-perform. So focus on those. You've also got to make sure that you have enough resource. And I would say enough resource both from an IT perspective, but also inside the organization. The days of IT handling everything and just delivering the end result, no, you can't do it. They're strapped. They don't have enough time, and they don't have the expertise. You need smart teams, business analysts, teams in the organization who are taking responsibility and ownership for these business processes and these solutions. So I mentioned quickly, or just a minute ago, the idea of a business analyst. We've recommended for a couple of years now, probably maybe 3, 4, the idea of having a business analyst. Every company that's hired one never regretted and probably would hire another one if they got the chance. A business analyst is somebody who has good sense of process. They're not programmers. They're technically capable. They're good at communication. They work well with IT, with vendors, with teams in the organization to help deploy solutions. A little bit of training, a little bit of process management, a little bit of troubleshooting, a little bit of testing, a little bit of rollout. I mean, they are just 100% dedicated to that technology adoption. And when you think about one moderately expensive role, helping 10, 15, 20 project managers use a project management solution better, helping 5 or 6 estimating people use their solution better, then turning around and helping streamline AP processing, it's a home run. So business analyst, good role to have. Now, I also like the role of a super user. So in each company that you are part of, or each function, each solution, you should have one person dedicated to being a champion of that solution. That's somebody who gets to know the product better than everybody else. They do training when needed. They do troubleshooting. They kind of coach and promote the use of the solution. They go to user conferences. They put in suggestions for improvements. Sometimes they're first line of support. I mean, it can be all kinds of things, but having somebody being a champion for a solution in the company is highly valuable. You may need a little bit of an IT reboot. We're finding that the traditional IT departments that we've seen in the past have kind of broken down, and now we have a new and different, more nimble IT department evolving. And I would say a movement away from infrastructure, servers, data centers, storage, and more into finding managed services, help desk, and more about the user community and deployment is where that's going. I also think that you really need to promote the culture of change. We've been in a lot of organizations where there is just an absolute, somewhere between ambivalent and outright hostility toward change. And that cannot survive in this marketplace. Things are moving too quickly. Change should be the byword and the accepted norm. And if you're doing things the same way today that you were 2 years ago, you've really got to ask yourself, why? Why are we doing that? Because the technology is moving quickly, that it's changing the way we do things. That doesn't mean every product is exactly right. You do have to hold on to some core principles. But from a processing standpoint, I mean, think about it. We had fax machines back in the day, and we had paper before that. And we shouldn't have any business processes that depend on that mentality from back then. Okay. And I'm going to say, before I get to my next slide, if you do have any questions, we're going to have a minute available. We'll have a few minutes available here shortly to answer some questions. So with that, I'm going to go. So I wanted to just mention quickly, and this would be the closest we come to a commercial announcement, but I talked about business process, and it talked about systems. And we actually developed a solution. There's no charge to help you self-assess. So you can go to this link and sign up, and it asks you a series of questions based on process area to evaluate your business processes and your the systems in place. And it measures how well you're doing compared to the average in the database and best in class. So we think it's helpful to spur the dialogue, and you're welcome to go there if you like. Now, with that, I'm going to give us some time for questions, but I will say that what my goal today was not to answer specific things about software products, but more to give you a framework for how to think about all that's coming at us and what's happening in the marketplace, because it's very hard to get your bearing when everything feels like it's in motion. And so I wanted to try and calm the water a little bit and give you some insight into where we're headed. And I would also say that don't be fearful about stepping in. It will be a little rocky at first, but it is certainly doable, and you will learn as you go. Make good decisions, deploy well, and do it at a pace that the organization can stand. But no change is not a good idea. So with that, Nick, how do we do on questions?
We got a couple. Certainly, if something did pop up, feel free to add it to the questions window. But one that came up that I like personally, it hits close to home for me, is the concept of the business analyst. How do you find someone to be a business analyst in the construction realm who typically doesn't nurture that type of skill set? Like the folks who are attracted to construction aren't necessarily the same folks who want to become a business analyst. So I'm curious about your thoughts on cultivating that skill set and finding those people in the organization.
Well, that's a great question, Nick, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I would tell you the best way to find that person is open your door. They're in your organization already. It is a project manager who is kind of gotten tired of maybe traveling or project managing, looking for a new challenge, wants to be engaged in process improvement overall. They already know everybody in the company. They already know all the processes and, hidden secrets and things. They know some of the systems that are in place that maybe need to be replaced. So having somebody from inside, if they're good and known and trusted, can be very valuable. And I've seen most of the 80% of the business analysts that I've seen be successful came from inside. And if you were to put a notice out, do a search in ZipRecruiter or whatever you use for a business analyst, you'll find them because they know. And I would tell you that they don't have to be absolutely omniscient about construction processes. A good business analyst can sit in a room and be engaged and probe and ask and document with the subject matter experts. So you don't need to be the expert yourself if you're surrounded by other people that do. And it helps a little bit. It does help because you got to challenge. Hey, wait a minute. Why are we doing that again? So you do want to have skill in that capability. Certainly a bashful wallflower isn't the right. I mean, you've got to be ready to mix it up a little bit as a business analyst. But I think those people exist in your company. And I would position it as a promotion. This is an opportunity for an individual to actually have positive influence in the company in a number of areas and get a sense of areas outside of their core expertise, like project management.
Awesome. I love that response. One other one that came up is around the resistance to BIM and kind of data analytics in a broader sense. How do you communicate and challenge that status quo and manage the change management side of becoming BIM enabled and data analytics enabled as an organization?
Well, I will. It's interesting you say that. So I'm going to answer those separately because I feel like they deserve separate responses. the BIM, I wouldn't want a contractor to be deploying BIM because the owner said so. They need to be deploying it because it's a better method, and the benefit accrues to the contractor and to the owner. And when contractors embrace BIM operationally, they begin to see the benefits of the advanced planning, the visualization, the ability to coordinate better, make better decisions, reduce the number of change orders. And pretty soon, you tell a team, a foreman, superintendent, a project manager, hey, we got a job over here, but we're not going to use BIM because we don't need it. And they're like, no, you are bringing that in. So it is an adoption process of getting them comfortable. And it's not like you go from 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. I mean, it is a transition. The best individual would be to have a design coordinator, BIM coordinator, hire that person in and pilot on a couple of projects and just gradually get, it's kind of, I mean, I hate the analogy because it's so overused, but it's definitely a crawl, walk, run where you're doing, some 5Ks, getting strength up, and then you're doing half marathons and then deciding about something more. You will see as you evolve in this where your opportunities are. And then pretty soon it's a competitive advantage. And some of your lower end competition fall off because they don't have that capability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The proof is in the pudding there. It's a matter of, getting the win on the board for sure.
Now, the other thing you mentioned was data analytics.
Right.
And there's a very significant problem right now with BI, business intelligence. Power BI, Tableau, they are the coolest looking, sexiest software we have, right? And when you put up a dashboard with dials and gauges and widgets and all that stuff, people are like, oh my God, I want that. And you could go buy it for almost nothing. But if the data underneath is bad, not clean, not organized, not standardized, then the graphs mean nothing. So I think that you, rather than go after the sizzle, if you will, and the shiny object, you've really got to stop and look at your data and ask yourself, are my processes in a condition that yields rich data? Because if they are, and you drop on Power BI or Tableau, you get significant insight into performance things like jobs that don't perform well, technicians that perform very well, customers that are more profitable, equipment that needs better maintenance. I mean, it's all over the place. But data strategy and data cleanliness are going to be our buzzwords for the next foreseeable future.
Awesome. For time's sake, we have one more that might be a quick hitter, but is around the role of AI. We talked a lot about like documents, for example, and data, kind of underlying that. But in your opinion, where does AI fit in this conversation, and how can teams kind of dip their toe into utilizing that for, various different work streams? And I realize this may not be a quick hitter now that I'm saying
it's not bad. You will see, you have to have, and I'm not the data scientist guy, but I've been around it a little bit. And I would say that you have to have something approximating big data in order to implement AI. AI, machine learning, is when the computer becomes smart enough on the behavior to know something or to project something. So for example, if we had telematics and telematics on all our equipment, and we're getting all our equipment data in, and a little AI bot is reading all this inbound data, and we're noticing that we have expensive work orders when we don't do maintenance at 3,000 miles or 3,000 hours. And but if we do our maintenance at 2,500, it reduces it. It sees that and it makes recommendations. that would be a concept of AI.
Great.
Another one would be an AP invoice processing. If you can get OCR, optical character recognition, to read invoices and get the date, capture the data off the invoice, and the AI engine knows what to do, because probably 80% of our invoices are from 5 to 10 vendors anyway. What to do, who to send them to for approval, where to route them, how to pay them. You're going to see some of that. So we will see AI certainly in our space, but that should not, my opinion, that should not be everybody's number one concern right now, because we have a problem right now with more fundamental things, right? Like we've got contractors that don't have good job costs, who are billing out of spreadsheets, who don't issue POs. So why are we worrying about AI when we don't have the most fundamental things available? So I'm kind of a proponent, maybe old school, of kind of building on a foundation of good process and good systems, and then work your way up. And AI will be there when you're ready.
Yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree more. Awesome. Well, we're right at time. I want to thank, Christian, obviously, excellent presentation. Thanks for bringing your experience to this, to the table here. For all of the attendees, I can give you a quick rundown of what's next in the sessions. One is a conversation with our partner Raken and utilizing daily reports and integrating systems. We have an awesome conversation with Harder Mechanical around ransomware best practices for those in the IT space that don't like downtime. There's a lot of really rich information in that presentation. And then 2 Q&A roundtable sessions for folks who are interested either in the roadmap of the Ignite product or administering Ignite, from a back-end perspective. So, I really, want to thank everyone for attending and providing great questions as part of this conversation. And with that, we'll go ahead and call it a session. Thanks all.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Ignite.